Hello everyone, I'm Ed Densel and I host Unfound and I run this YouTube channel. I realize you don't want to give a thumbs up to the following video until you watch it. You know what? That's totally understandable. I can appreciate that. But what you can do right now is subscribe to this channel. The button is right there. Thanks.
Charley Alcott White was a 49-year-old from Taos, New Mexico. She worked in the arts community in that city, but was moving to Albuquerque. On the morning of May 6, 2016, Charley didn't show up for a going-away party held in her honor. Charley's car was later found at a well-known suicide spot outside town. She was never seen again. I'm Ed Densel, and this is Unfound. From those opening sentences, and if you're a really dedicated Unfound listener, you know we've covered several disappearances like Charley's over the past almost 6 years. Can you name some of them? I'll give you a couple of seconds. Some of them are Jake Lachelet, Shane Fell, Ben Archer, and if you prefer a woman, Crystal Bailey. All missing people who disappeared next to a river or flowing body of water. Logic tells us, yes, they all went into the water. But, dare I say it, in all of those, the public opinion is mixed. There is no consensus. So then, how are we supposed to come to firmer conclusions regarding these types of disappearances? What are the criteria? Well, with Charley White's disappearance, hers may be the toughest of all, because she had none of the issues the above victims had. What are we supposed to think about a woman who really was going away? And now a summary of the case. This is brought to you by my friend Megan Linus's website, charleyproject.org. Charley White was a 21st century kind of woman. Educated, independent, somewhat diverse in the mixture between business and entertainment in her daily pursuits. In fact, working for an arts collective in Taos. Charley was married, and like so many 21st century couples, she and her husband lived apart during the preceding year due to a change in his occupation. And, at least on the surface, that didn't seem to affect Charley or him at all. Her husband would come back to Taos on weekends to maintain the marriage they had. And in the summer of 2016, Charley would be joining him in Albuquerque. So, on the morning of May 6th, 2016, Charley's co-workers decided to throw her a going-away party. Charley knew about it and seemingly was ecstatic about attending, even though she would be leaving all of her friends in a few weeks. Yet, Charley didn't show up. Around the same time, at the Rio Grande Gorge Bridge, a vendor noticed a car that had been in the parking lot before the sun came up. Police identified this car as Charley's. She was never seen again. Searches below the bridge and downriver were conducted many times, with the only significant find being a shoe that fit the size and description of one Charley would have worn, although there is no proof it was hers. As I've talked about many times, the suicide rate has skyrocketed since I was born in 1970. So this statistic, along with the facts of Charley's case, do point in that direction. However, We also know there are many people who faked or tried to fake their deaths, and there are killers out there who have tried to make it look like victims jumped from bridges or buildings when they really didn't. Consider all of that as you try to answer these 3 questions during the interview. Number 1, if Holly drove straight to the bridge that morning, why did her car appear to have been on a dirt road? Number 2, what are we to make of a still unidentified vehicle that was outside Holly's house 36 hours before she disappeared? And number 3, as we usually do when married women go missing, are there any reasons to suspect her husband? Holly's father is not sure what to think regarding her disappearance. He is open to all ideas. However, he sees no reason she would have committed suicide. The guest for this episode is the private investigator for Holly's family, Elaine Graves. Unfound News. We're now a month into the Unfound live show on YouTube, being part of the podcast feed, meaning all of you listening now get it on Tuesday in just audio only. I'd like some feedback from those of you who are discovering the live show for the first time. Next, it's the 1st of July. You know what that means. Newsletter. It should/will be coming out later today, July 1st. That is, if you're on the email list. If you're not, contact me at unfoundpodcast@gmail.com. I promise not to spam you. Finally, I've completed the most recent Unfound now. It's now available for members only on our YouTube channel. For the rest of you, you'll have to wait till next week. If you'd like to change that, please go to the Unfound Podcast channel on YouTube and become a member for only 10 cents a day.
Where you can find Unfound on these following podcast platforms: Spotify, iTunes, Stitcher, Podbean, and many others, especially outside the United States. Social media sites: YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and the newest one, TikTok. Listener support sites: patreon.com/unfound podcast, paypal.me/unfound podcast. The website, theunfoundpodcast.com. The email address, unfoundpodcast@gmail.com. And please mention Unfound at all true crime websites and forums. Thank you. I'm so happy to have on this episode of Unfound the private investigator for Holly White's family, Elaine Graves. Elaine, welcome to Unfound.
Thanks for having me, Ed.
You're very welcome, and thanks for coming to us from New Mexico, where you just told me before we started it is pouring down rain with a thunderstorm. So let's hope we don't lose power while we're doing this. Let's start here. I don't have, as we were just talking before we started recording, I don't speak to many private investigators. In fact, I'll have to go back and see the last time I did so as far as an official interview. But let's just talk about you as much as you want to reveal. You do not have to reveal any dirty family secrets or anything. Maybe just a little a background about yourself, and mainly maybe just how you decided to become a private investigator. And then, of course, we'll eventually get to how you got involved with Holly's case. Let's start there.
Well, my background is in the legal arena. I've worked for attorneys for most of my adult life, starting as a paralegal, and then I started investigating legal cases for attorneys. My background, for the past decade, has been missing persons cases. Before that, I did a lot of wrongful death cases, medical malpractice, I did some key tam cases, which are like government whistleblower type cases. So that's my background. And about 10 years ago, I started working on missing persons cases, and I like it. That seems to be kind of my niche. And so that's what I've been doing for the past decade. I take all different cases, but that really is where my passion is.
Could you have guessed maybe in high school, or maybe you went to college? You don't have to reveal whether you did or not, but maybe in your late teen, early 20s, could you have ever guessed you'd be doing this? Was like a life goal to do that, or did you think you'd be doing
Never.
something else with your life?
Never in my wildest dreams did I think I would be doing this at my age.
Me too.
Didn't expect it.
I know the feeling. All right, so you worked for some lawyers. Do you think that working with lawyers before getting into missing persons cases, do you think that helped you in some way? Let's maybe talk a little bit about how did that kind of morph into disappearance cases? Are there similarities?
Definitely. I always have liked working with the families, and the work that I was doing before, I always worked very closely with the families of, people who were, died in a malpractice case or that kind of thing. And so, working on the plaintiff side has always really been something that I love doing, and I seem to be pretty good at it. And so, kind of gravitating into missing persons cases, it seemed pretty comfortable for me. And I was used to looking for people for trials to testify, maybe that the attorneys couldn't find. And so, and actually that's a lot harder because, back then I was looking for people who didn't want to be found. And that's tough. I mean, people can really cover their tracks pretty good. So missing persons cases, it's a little different.
Straight out missing persons cases where it's not part of some legality that's going to trial. This could be like we're talking about Hollies. There's a lot of different possibilities, right?
Definitely.
Yeah. Okay. I would not ask you to ever say any names, but is there a missing persons case before Hollies that kind of sticks out to you that you maybe want to talk about, just to go over a few facts or something, that sticks out to you once again before we get into Holly's disappearance for the rest of this interview?
Nothing that really stands out. Around the same time that I started Holly's case, I was working on the Frankie Martin case. I don't know if a lot of people know about that. He went missing from Taos around the same time Holly did, actually within about a month. And so I thought there could be a connection. And so I started looking into his case, and actually the family ended up hiring me on that case. And turns out there were no ties to Holly's case, and his remains were found a few years ago. So that was kind of a tough one, and that one definitely stands out. He was a young man from the Navajo Nation, firefighter, just really loved, people really loved him and cared about him. And I worked for his mom, and gosh, I don't remember how many sisters he has. A lot of sisters. So it was interesting working for mom and and all of his sisters, but it didn't have the happiest of endings, but definitely it was nice to be able to get the family the closure that they needed.
Yeah. Would you say, being that his remains were found, was it kind of like a situation where you, as an investigator, had a good idea what you thought happened, and that was what the ending was? Or I guess what I'm saying is, was your theory regarding the case the one that actually ended up being the true?
Well, we had an idea where he thought he was in the area. He used to frequent the area. And so we had an idea of where we thought he was going to be. Really, we didn't think that he was alive. Really, it was a question as to whether it was murder or an accident. Wow. And it was ruled an accident.
All right. Thank you for sharing that. I'm sure many of the listeners and viewers are going to probably look that up now. Probably there's probably some articles that were written back at the time. I guess it was also 2016 when he went missing as well. I'm sure they'll look that up. Thank you for sharing. All right, let's move on to, of course, the reason we are here, and that is for Holly's disappearance. Do you remember where you were when you first heard about Holly's disappearance? Did you hear about it, like maybe read it in the newspaper, or how did you first hear about it? Of course, you living in the general area.
Well, I live in Santa Fe, about an hour and a half away. And I think the first place I saw it was on Facebook. And people were talking about a woman going missing from Taos. And I think what shook people the most, what I really remember the most, is the fact that she was sort of a kind of a staple in Taos society. She
Right.
didn't live on the fringes like some people do who go missing. I mean, there's no drugs, there's no she wasn't homeless, and she, everybody knew her from the TCA, the Taos Community of the Arts, where she worked. And so I think it kind of rattled everybody. And I that's really how I felt too. Like, how could somebody who has lived in the area and worked in the area and seemed so stable just disappear like that? It was shocking to me. I have family who live in the Taos area who just were so disturbed by it. And so it stuck with me for a while, and I was looking for every update that I could find, and just talking to people. And of course there were lots of theories and lots of rumors and stuff. And so I think I felt like most people in Taos did, even though I didn't know her. There's a feeling of like, wow, this is happening in my town, in the town that I grew up in. It was shocking.
Okay.
And scary too.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I agree with
you
that, after covering 255 disappearances, you're right. Holly is not in a demographic that you would say a person would most likely go disappearing in. That is certainly a good point that you brought up. How did it then come to be, and how long was it after her disappearance that you ended up talking to or meeting, maybe even in person, her father, Ray, and how you became now intertwined with her disappearance? How long did that take after her disappearance, and how did that all happen?
It was about 6 months after she disappeared. I knew that she hadn't been found. Like everybody, I had been, following it on in the newspaper and that kind of thing. And so through Holly's friends, I got in touch with her dad, and I just reached out to him. I figured that I'm probably the only PI for miles around in this, small area. And I reached out to him, and I asked him if there was anything that I could do for him. At the time, thinking that maybe I could just make a few phone calls or put him in touch with some of my contacts or something, never imagining that I would actually be hired and become the PI, on the case all these years later. That's not how it started.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you get kind of networked with him, and like 6 months was there like I don't want to get into your business practices necessarily, but was it like an actual contract, or was there an understanding, Ray telling you, okay, you're going to, do this for our family, you're going to report back to me? Is that kind of how it went?
Well, Ray is, he's an older gentleman, and he really is just such a gentleman, and really kind of old fashioned. And he lives in Kansas. And so he was there when I spoke with him, and he said, I think I'm going to go out to New Mexico because I want to meet you in person before we do anything else. I just want to see what the energy is like between us. I want to see kind of how we vibe, that kind of thing. So he came out to New Mexico and I met him for the first time, and we got along so great, and we just felt so comfortable with each other. And I could tell that he really trusted me, and he knew that my heart was really in the right place. And that's what he wanted. That's who he wanted, looking for his daughter. And so from there, he said, find Holly, as long as it takes, whatever we have to do, however long he could hang on to look for her. Right. And he asked me to be part of that. And I told him that I'll look for Holly as long as I need to.
Okay. Now, of course, then the listeners and viewers now understand. Of course, I never knew Holly. You never knew Holly. But just in general, maybe the idea that you've gotten about Holly as a grown woman, just what Ray has maybe told you. Of course, you said that you spoke to some of Holly's friends. Maybe some of the qualities that stick out to you being, Holly as a person, or her personality, whatever it may be. What are some of those things you think that the listeners need to know before we get into, some of these more specific areas?
One of the things that her dad always has talked about is that Holly was very loving and really a kind person. And the thought that she would disappear on her own, that she would commit suicide without telling anybody or leaving a note, it seems like almost a very cruel thing to do, especially disappearing and knowing that you're never going to see your family again. You're never going to talk to your 80-year-old dad again. And from the beginning, I was told by a lot of people, but also her dad, that she just wouldn't do that. Holly has a very kind heart. And that's the one thing that really stands out about her. That, she was not cruel. She was not mean. She was not vindictive. And certainly not towards her family and friends. She wouldn't have done that.
Okay. All right. Let's move on to this. Once again, we're just going to touch upon these things because these are some things maybe that are unique to her that also listeners and viewers need to know. Just some of the current situation of things that were going on in Holly's life at the time. She was married, but it was the situation where she and her husband, they were married. I mean, they weren't, I guess, what we would call estranged, but they had been living apart for a little bit due to work situations. What do you know about that? What can we say about that?
Holly and Jeff is Holly's husband. They decided to move out of Taos to Albuquerque. And so all of that was going on at the time that Holly disappeared. Jeff took a job in Albuquerque. He got a job in Albuquerque before Holly did. And so he had been living in Albuquerque for about a year when Holly disappeared. He had a job. He had secured a rental house for them. And Holly stayed behind and was packing up the house. And they were set to close on the house, I'm going to say a couple weeks after she disappeared. Wow. So all of that was in the works. She was training her replacement at work. And then her husband was driving from Albuquerque to Taos every weekend. And then they would talk on the phone. Okay. So they were right in the middle of moving.
Okay. And being that you live in New Mexico, just best you can do, how long does it take to drive from Albuquerque to Taos? Approximately.
It's about a 2.5 hour drive.
All right, so not too close. Not too close.
It's a little ways.
Okay. Is it? And I think of New Mexico as being a sparsely populated state. Would you say that's all highway mostly?
It's all highway.
All highway. Okay, thank you. All right, so they're living apart. He gets a job down there, and they had been living apart in this situation, which, these days with adults being married but also having their own jobs, this is not an unusual situation. Sometimes a husband or wife gets a job in a different town or a city, and people have to move, and the other spouse has to, make changes too. So maybe this isn't unusual. But once again, how long had they been in this situation, approximately?
Jeff had been living in Albuquerque for about a year,
Okay.
and it had taken them that long to get a buyer for the house, sell the
Wow.
house.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. So, wow, that took a while. All right. So, your understanding then is the time of Holly's disappearance, the house was sold. They had found somebody.
They had found somebody. The house ended up being sold to someone different.
Uh,
So the
huh.
person that Holly thought were selling the house to at the time she disappeared isn't actually who ended up buying the house.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. So also then we've all moved in our lives at least once. I've moved several times. So and I think this kind of maybe makes this disappearance, at least analyzing the house situation, a little more difficult. So the house, being that they were moving, a little cluttered at the time of her disappearance. What is your understanding?
Yeah, definitely in a little disarray. Boxes. The weekend before, they'd had a U-Haul there where they were starting to move some furniture. And so from the pictures that I've seen and from the friend that I spoke with who went into the house, who probably was the first person that I know of who went into the house after Holly disappeared. The house was um, it was tidy. Holly was a pretty tidy person, but you could definitely tell that they were in the middle of moving.
Okay.
Mhm.
All right. Very good.
Yeah.
Now, regarding this job that she had in, once again, what was it called again? You can tell us all again there, Elaine. This job that she had in Taos having to do with the arts,
It's called the Taos Center for the Arts.
Taos Center for the Arts. And so she
Yeah.
had already secured a different job in Albuquerque.
I don't know that she had completely secured it, but it was definitely in the works. I don't know whether she had actually agreed to take this job or not, but she was definitely a top contender for the job.
Okay, very good.
Mhm.
So in general, once again, you've gotten to know her father, you've gotten to know some of her friends in the area. In general, how did they say that Holly was feeling about this move? As we all know, moving, I've moved across the United States a couple times. It can be a little, a lot of anxiety, getting a new job, leaving friends, the prospect of making new friends. What feelings did she express maybe to her friends and coworkers about this time?
Her friends that I spoke with um, generally have said that she was excited to move. She was looking forward to it. She she was anxious though. She was sad to leave her job, her home of over 20 years. So she was sad. One person said that she was very nervous and felt like she was starting over at her age, which was at the time she disappeared, she was going to turn 50.
Mm.
And but I think overall she was excited to move to a bigger city. Albuquerque is a lot bigger than Taos. There are more opportunities, more things to do, and it sounds like she was really looking forward to that.
The way you understand it, regarding her, husband getting a job in a different city, at the time, was that something that was he actually looking for a job in Albuquerque, or was he like looking for a new job anywhere? Or were their plans always to move to Albuquerque? What do you understand about, what is your understanding about this?
It sounds like the plans were always to move to Albuquerque. His parents live there. He has family there, but his
Oh,
parents are there. And at the time, were elderly and not in very good health. And so, one of the reasons that they decided to move there was to be closer to them and be able to take care of them as they needed it.
okay, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, and we have to remember, as you've already stated, uh, she's, I guess, not originally from New Mexico, but her father lives in Kansas, and I guess her mother is deceased.
Yes.
Okay, very good. Let's move on to this. Now, this location is something that we're going to discuss. Of course, just about any disappearance we cover on Unfound, we talk about where was that last person seen, or a significant spot. But I think that we really have to have a good understanding of this spot that we're going to be talking about, this gorge bridge near Taos, New Mexico, because maybe if you don't live in New Mexico, it has like a little bit of a reputation or has gained a reputation over the years. What can you say about that? Being that you live in New Mexico, what can you tell the listeners who don't know about it about this gorge bridge?
So the Gorge Bridge is about 8 miles outside of Taos.
Mm-hmm.
It is kind of a tourist spot in the Taos area. People come from all over to look at the bridge. It is about 700 or so feet above the Rio Grande River.
Wow.
So, it's beautiful. People come from all over to take pictures and to see the views. And it's quite a sight. If you haven't seen it, it's worth, looking at, Googling it or something like that. Unfortunately, people come from all over the world, not just to see it, but they also come here to jump off of it and commit suicide.
Huh.
It's very well known for that.
Is, once again, you being from New Mexico, your understanding, is this like a new thing, or has this been going on since like the 1980s, people jumping off, or is this something that's just fairly new?
It's definitely not new. People have been doing it for a long time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Has the government there ever put out a statistic regarding how many people that they think have jumped from that bridge? Their best guess. Does anybody even know?
I don't have an exact number. What OMI here in this area says, and what the Taos County Sheriff's Department have told me is, it seems like there's an average of about 4 people a year that jump from there.
Okay.
I don't know if it's been more the last few years, but it varies. But that kind of gives you an idea.
Okay, very good. That gives us a very good idea. Thank you.
Yeah.
And we should state that at this point, my understanding, what you told me in an email, they do not yet have cameras up for this, but they're working on that or something. That's like in the next budget for that area or something.
Yes, Taos County just received a grant of $150,000 to make improvements to the bridge, and they're going to improve the railings and that kind of thing. But one of the biggest bonuses, I think, is that they want to put cameras up there, and it'll be great for someone like me who, looks for people who, we don't know for sure if they've jumped or not. We don't know if maybe they just left their car there, or were murdered, or that kind of thing.
That's right.
So it's going to be really, really helpful.
Right.
Be
I
great.
agree with you.
Please.
Yes. And as the listeners know, maybe you do not know, Elaine, but I've covered a couple disappearances in San Francisco. And of course, people automatically think, well, did these young men jump off the San Francisco Bridge? And I think the big difference maybe between what we're talking about here and talking about the Golden Gate Bridge is that, first of all, they don't allow anybody to walk out on the bridge at night. That's maybe one of the big differences. They don't allow anybody out there. In addition, it's very common for people who jump off the Golden Gate Bridge to be seen. There are tourists right there, and people will just jump off even though they have people right there watching them, and they'll jump to their suicide off the bridge. And in fact, there's a well-known documentary that was made about that, maybe not quite 15 years ago, that I've watched just to educate myself. So both bridges, both suicide, it seems, locations, but different in some ways, especially since I guess the Golden Gate Bridge is a lot better known than the Gorge Bridge. But both sites that seem people go to jump. And we're not saying Holly did, but we're going to talk about this. Her car was found there, and it's, of course, something to consider. Let's move on to this. May 5th, it was a Thursday, as we worked out beforehand. I got it wrong on the outline. Thank you for correcting me, Elaine. That Thursday, May 5th, what is known about that day, Holly's movements, who she talked to, did she go to work? What have you discovered about those days?
So May 5th was a Thursday, as you said. She it was the start of a weekend in Taos where a lot of people celebrate Cinco de Mayo.
Hmm.
They were getting ready to celebrate that over the weekend. And also Mother's Day was Sunday, that coming up Sunday. So Thursday, Holly went to work like normal. She actually went to work a little early, which was unusual for her. But given the timing, she was clearing out her desk. She was kind of closing up shop and bringing, some of her things home, and she was training her replacements. And so she got to work early. She worked, like just a normal day.
Okay.
She had lunch there at the office. Outside, they have a really pretty yard where she would eat breakfast, and she stayed in and ate lunch there. She met with a client about 5:15 and took a deposit on a gallery show that was coming up. And she went to Kentucky Fried Chicken, picked up some dinner. It was still in the refrigerator. She got home. The neighbor saw her. She visited with the neighbor's grandkids next door, talked a little bit, said hello, went inside the house, and that is the last time anybody actually saw her.
Okay. All right. What about
the rest of the
Please, go ahead, please.
the rest of the evening, she spoke with her husband on the phone about 8:00 that night. It was a quick conversation to talk about the following day. He was going to drive up from Albuquerque for her going away party that the office staff was having for her. So they talked about that. Jeff said that she was in good spirits. They joked a little bit. They hung up, and then Holly played a game on her phone for a couple of hours and chatted with a friend of hers out of state, and then said that she was really tired and she was going to bed. They hung up, and that was the last time anyone spoke with her.
Okay. All right. And so just a regular day. Just a regular average day. And like you said, actually the next day, and we'll get to May 6th here in a moment, but the understanding was the next day they were going to be having a going away party for her because she was going away.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Okay. All right. So everything seems normal. Everybody thinks that she's going to show up for work the next morning and they're going to give her this going away party. Was that then, when you say going away party, was that actually going to be her last day working there, or was that just the day that they had this party planned?
I think they had the party planned. It was a Friday that they were going to do it, a Friday evening. And my understanding is that she still had another week of work. And so her last day of work was going to be the following Friday.
Okay, very good. Thank you. All right, so then, of course, everybody thinks, okay, she's going to show up the next day and they're going to have this big party. Like you said, her husband was going to drive up from Albuquerque. You've already talked about that. It's 2.5 hours. But we get to May 6th the next morning, and what happens?
Well, she was scheduled to meet her best friend for a walk in the park. They walked the dog every morning for about 8 years, hardly missing a day.
Wow.
And they had talked about it the night before and, agreed that they were going to meet like usual. And Holly's friend got to the park and waited for Holly. And Holly was never late. She was always earlier on time. And, the time went by. Her friend was calling her. Her friend was texting her. No answer, no answer. She didn't show up. So, yeah.
Okay. And what did the friend do next?
Her friend had a key to her house and went to her house, saw that the car was gone, and decided to just go into the house and just make sure everything was okay. She walked into the house and the dog was there. The dog seemed like maybe she hadn't been out all night and really needed to go out to the bathroom. She let her out to the bathroom, gave her water. The dog was really thirsty and the water bowl was empty. And she looked around and looked in the bedroom, called out for her, and no Holly. She did immediately notice that her phone and her purse were there in the house, which is unusual to have her phone and her purse there, but the car gone.
All right, I agree.
Yeah. So she started making phone calls and getting in touch with Holly's friends and coworkers and saying, "Hey, have you talked to Holly? She didn't meet me like she was supposed to. Does anyone know where she is?" Nobody had seen her that morning, had talked to her. Her friends and when she didn't show up to work, her coworkers decided to drive around town and see if they could find her car anywhere. And one of her coworkers said, "Hey, I'm going to go drive out to the Gorge Bridge." And just happened to decide to drive out to the Gorge Bridge, and her car was there. Her car was parked there.
Have you? That's very interesting to me that somebody in the heat of the moment, would think, well, maybe she, because once again, it doesn't sound to me, at least the way of course, you didn't know her, I didn't know her, but it doesn't seem to me that anybody would think that she would have any reason to go out to the bridge. But somebody in their mind thought, you know what, maybe somebody got to better go check the bridge. Have you talked to this person yourself? And did that person explain what was in their mind right at that moment? That was the first idea that kind of came to their mind.
Well, that person had been in the hospital or at the doctor or something. Actually, I believe in Albuquerque, and had just driven in from there that morning. And it probably wouldn't be the first place I would look if I had, someone that I loved who was missing, unless I felt like they were suicidal or I felt like there was a reason to go there. But from what he tells me, he just felt like going out in that direction and going out to the bridge just made sense to just cover all bases, to be able to just cross everything off the list.
Wow. So that is how her car was found. A coworker says, you know what? Somebody better go check the bridge. Of course, it has a reputation there by the locals. Of course, the locals would know better than anybody. And that's how her car was found.
Yeah. And so about 6 a.m, a vendor was there at the bridge. She was the first vendor there. Now, people on the side of the road sell jewelry and sell, all different things. And so Holly's car was parked in a place where they normally set up the tables. And so when this vendor got there, she saw Holly's car parked there and was looking for the owner of the car to move it because the car was in the way and they needed to start setting up. And so they thought that maybe it was a hiker or somebody who was out there early in the morning, maybe taking pictures or something like that. I believe that they looked in the window of the car to make sure nobody was in there, but they didn't actually touch the car. They looked around. They saw a couple of hikers, and the hikers said that they, didn't know who the car belonged to, didn't see anything. They had walked from a school that they were going to, They had actually walked from there, so they didn't have a vehicle there. And so the vendor called the police, and it was around that same time, a little bit of time had passed, and Holly's coworker was up there, and found the car. And then by that time, they called the police. Wow. And then Jeff was had gotten into town from Albuquerque, and from there they started the searches. The police went back to the house with Jeff and asked him, as you can imagine, a lot of questions.
Yeah, of
questioned her, and looked around the house. They didn't secure the home. They didn't process the home because at this time they assumed that it was a suicide. So, but they did decide to process the car just in case, which has been great. They towed the car, processed it, and because of that, we've had a little bit to go on with the investigation. And then as far as the house, it was not processed, but they did take really good pictures of how it looked when they got there.
Okay. So it's interesting to me that kind of at the beginning, there were kind of two different things going on. One is, of course, friends and coworkers being concerned about her. Of course, the first friend, her not showing up to walk the dog that morning. She goes over, has a key, which that's interesting to me. A friend would have a key for the place. For my place that I have here, my brother has a key, but maybe she didn't have any family in the area. Maybe that makes sense. So there's that tangent of people looking for her, that they end up at the bridge. And then you have this other area, this other part of people who are vendors, can't figure out whose car this is. They end up calling the police, and kind of each group kind of meets right there at the car around the same time. That's the impression I get. All right, so two different groups thinking something weird was going on, and I guess they were both right, because of course Holly is still missing all these years later. All right, so you've already stated the car was processed, the house was not. That the car got processed at all, in my opinion, is probably a miracle, because a lot of times they don't. But maybe we maybe just want to go right to that. We'll get to the searches in a moment, because of course her car was at this parking lot at the bridge. But as far as the car, anything unusual about it? Things in it that shouldn't have been in it, or things not in it that shouldn't have been in it? Anything like that? Anything that stuck out to anybody?
Well, of course, all I have had to go on are photographs.
Mm-hmm.
To me, the car looked very dirty. It was really dusty. The tires were really, really dusty. And it's highway all the way from Holly's home, right in the middle of town, out to that bridge. And it reminded me of the way my car looks when I've been on dirt roads. Okay. That's what it looked like to me. Yeah. As far as what was in the car, the keys were in the car. They were in the cup holder. Okay. There were some weeds, some grass type stuff in the passenger side floor. Besides that, according to her husband, everything that was in there was what was always in there. A box of Kleenex, just normal things.
Very good.
Very tidy, very clean inside.
No signs of violence in it. No, like the radio wasn't ripped out of it. Nothing like that.
Nothing like that.
Okay. Did they do any you said it was processed. Did they do any fingerprints on it? I'm not guessing that even if they did, they're going to reveal all of that, but do you know if fingerprints were taken of the car? Fingerprints
were taken, and also DNA samples were taken.
Okay, and do we know, I'm guessing we don't, but I'm going to ask anyway, do we know anything about any of that? For example, were there any fingerprints found in or on the car that have never been identified? Do we know?
That I can't speak about because that's the investigation that I was not involved in that. That's something
Okay.
that the New Mexico State Police did. And so I probably shouldn't comment on their case.
Okay. All right. Very good. I got to ask. That's what we reporters do. Okay. So the car gets checked out probably more than we're probably used to here at Unfound, because it's not unusual for cars that could be connected to disappearances being given back to the family the same day. It's very common. Wrong, but very common all over the United States. Go to the house. As you've already stated, she's moving, so maybe it might be a little difficult to determine whether anything is really out of place or not. She's moving stuff around. We got all these boxes. You've already stated, though, that her phone and her purse were in the house, correct?
Yes.
Okay, very good. All right, so let's move on to this. And these are searches at the bridge. We realize that you were not there at the time. You didn't get involved 6 months later. But what is your understanding about the searches that were done? Of course, they're going to do that. Nobody saw, even if she did go off the bridge, nobody saw it. We don't know if she did, but there would have been nobody to see it. So they have to go search. What is your understanding about the searches that were done?
My understanding is that they had at least 2 different searches. It was the local police, the sheriff, and but I think the actual searches were conducted by the New Mexico State Police. They used a helicopter. They had cadaver and search and rescue dogs, as well as a lot of people on foot. From the reports that I've seen, it didn't look to me like the search and rescue dogs found her scent anywhere on the bridge, which is common for people who jump.
Okay.
So her scent was not anywhere on the bridge, and I think that's important.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so the searches went on from Friday when she was reported missing until I think they finally called off the last search Sunday, which would have been the 8th. And and people still continue to look for her. And over the years, I've conducted my own searches based on different tips and different leads that have come in. And I will say that just about everyone that we know of who has jumped from the bridge has been found. Their bodies have been recovered. So it's pretty unusual after so much time has passed to not have recovered a body of a jumper, found any bones or clothing or anything like that.
Okay, and we're going to talk about another woman who was also missing, who is presumed to have gone off the bridge, although there's no proof of that, but we may get to talk about her a little later in this discussion. Would you say your understanding, would you say, once again, given that this bridge is now known, do they pretty much have an idea of, if somebody does go off, where they need to look first? Like how far downstream? Is it kind of like almost like a textbook search now, being that they do it so often, being that so many people jump off? Would you say it's like that? They know like what to do now to find these jumpers, these suicide jumpers, as quickly as possible? Your impression?
Yeah, a lot of times, you can see the bodies just with binoculars. You can also tell where there are birds hanging around. Yeah, and for the most part, bodies seem to be recovered, not always in the water, but on the ground below, like where the the concrete pillars are, that kind of thing. Not everybody who jumps actually hits the water. But there are some cases where they do hit the water, and then the water will actually, take them, as far as a mile or so out.
Okay,
So, and to this day, we still have, rafters and kayakers there in the water who are always keeping their eyes out for Holly. always looking for bones, looking for clothing that doesn't look like it belongs, that kind of thing. And I still get phone calls almost 7 years later, saying, hey, come and check this out, or, this looks strange, or this is what I found, that kind of thing.
Right, and it's not unusual for remains to not be found for quite a while. They may look for like a week and not find anything, but maybe many months down the road, remains are found, just maybe by accident.
They are usually not years later,
Hmm.
but they're usually, for the most part, found pretty quickly.
Okay. Now, something that was found, and you'll have to explain how exactly it was found. It was a shoe, and it was certainly a female shoe. How was it discovered? When it was discovered? And, is it possibly, could it be connected to Holly herself?
So one of Holly's best friends there in Taos, as you can imagine, was devastated. Her son is like a guide there on the river, a river guide, a rafter, kayaker. And she asked him if he could go down and search the river. She said, nobody knows that river like you do. Go down and find our Holly. Look for her, see what you can find. And so he went out on Monday, would have been the Monday after she disappeared, and him and two other guys. And they looked and looked, and they didn't, of course, find Holly, but they found a shoe. They found a lot of things, but the shoe looked really new compared to the other clothing and debris and that sort of thing that was there. It was about a mile from the bridge, and it was in the water, but kind of off to the side. And he didn't know what it was, but he thought, it definitely looks out of place. It looks a lot newer than everything else, in better shape than everything else here. So let's take it. And so that's what they found. They took it to the police department and showed it to different people, Holly's boss, her coworkers, her husband, maybe her dad. I'm not sure about that. And it turns out that there are a lot of pictures of Holly on social media wearing shoes that look exactly like that shoe, and also in the same size that she wears.
Right, and we haven't stated for the record, Holly was what I would call, well, the average woman in the United States, I think, is 5'4", 5'5". She was like 5'11", correct?
Yes.
All right, so
Mhm.
she's at that upper 1% of women, and so her feet, of course, are going to be bigger. And this was a women's shoe. It just wasn't a woman's shoe, but it was an abnormally large woman's shoe.
It was the exact same size that Holly wears.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. All
Yeah.
right. So, and like you said, it was like a mile downstream, and it kind of stuck out because it looked so new compared to everything else around it.
Yes.
Okay. Did that, the way you understand it, I realize you weren't there at that moment. Did that kind of spur the searches on again to look down in that area, or did things still kind of get wrapped up when they got wrapped up? Did-
They, as far as the police's searches, they pretty much, wrapped the search up at that time.
Hmm.
And then when I came in 6 months later, as I said, my team did their own searches. And so we really concentrated on areas above where the shoe was found. It's very common for jumpers for their remains to be found with either one shoe on or no shoes on. And so we thought, well, maybe Holly didn't jump from the bridge. Maybe she was, along the rim of the river for whatever reason. And so, like I said, we did our own searches and we didn't find anything. We've never found that second shoe. But we also have never found those shoes in her closet or, with her belongings. So, yeah, it's possible
Okay.
it's her shoe.
Okay,
Mhm.
and once again, for the listeners, that we know we don't do theorizing here. We're only exploring this idea as far as facts go because her car was found at the bridge. We're not saying Leanne's not saying she believes that. I'm not saying I believe that. We're just going over the facts regarding all of the investigation into this disappearance. And we're going to present some other facts that may lead us maybe in a different direction here in a bit. But we need to cover this as well as we can. Being that you've been there, how would you describe the river in that area from the bridge down to approximately where the shoe is? Is it usually deep? Is it usually shallow? Is it usually rough, or how would you explain it, being that you've been there?
It varies depending on the time of year. At the time that Holly disappeared, the water was really high. I don't remember offhand exactly where it was, but it was pretty high that time of year in the springtime. And then there are other times of the year where the water is really, really low. And so typically when bodies are recovered, when the water is so high like that, the bodies tend to travel further, of course. And then, it's a lot easier to find them when the water is lower. And it's been so many years now that people have looked for her when the water's high, when the water's low, and pretty much everything in between.
Mm-hmm. Do we even know what the status was of the river at the time that the car was found there? Do we? Was it
The
somewhere in
water was
between?
very high.
It
No,
was very
it
high.
was high.
Okay.
It was very high.
All right. Thank you. Okay. So there's that. We should state something. I want to clarify something, and I'm maybe probably going to post some pictures so everybody can understand this. What's important to understand about this bridge going over the Rio Grande River is that the bridge, though, although it is very long, the river under it is fairly skinny. I mean, it's maybe 60 feet wide, but the bridge is like 700 feet wide. And as Elaine already stated, the bridge is 700 feet above where the river is. And so I think what we're saying here is if somebody, whether Holly did it or not, we could be talking about someone else. If you're going out there at night and jumping off the bridge, there's a very small part there at the bottom that you have to hit to even hit the river. And that's why, once again, earlier when Elaine said a lot of times jumpers are found on the ground, well, that's because the bridge spans mostly ground. It's just the river, the skinny river right in the middle. Is that correct? Is that how you would explain it, Elaine?
That's right. Yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
All right. Thank you. All right. Great. I just want everybody to understand that you said that before. Well, some of them don't even end up in the water, and that's the reason, because 90% of the area below the river is land. Okay. Just want to talk about the house a little bit more, specifically two items. Number one, being that she was at her house the night before, she talked to her husband. People saw her there, maybe pulling or whatever. Did the bed in her place look like it had been slept in?
From the pictures that I saw, the covers were pulled back. There was some clothes on the other side of the bed, and there was an indentation in the pillow that looked like her head had been on the pillow.
Okay. And the other point I want to ask you about is there was, you had told me in a prior conversation, in fact, right before we started this interview, is that when that friend got there that morning and had a key went in there, the alarm to her phone was going off. Do we know anything about what time this alarm was set at or how long it had been going off? Was it common maybe for her to use her phone as alarm? It is for me, but a lot of people just still have alarm clocks. What do we know about that?
From what I understand, it was typical for her to have the phone, have her alarm set because she got up so early in the morning to go walking. So she did use her phone, use the alarm clock on her phone, and she usually put it someplace not close to her bed so that she couldn't just keep hitting snooze. And she
Right.
was forced to, to get up and turn it off. And when her friend got there that morning, she did mention that the alarm was going off. That's the first thing she heard when she walked in the house.
Okay, but we don't know when that. Nobody looked at the phone to see what time that alarm had been set.
Mm-mm.
Okay.
Not that I know.
All right. So nothing seems unusual at the house. Hard to say, given that it was so cluttered before the moving. If she'd not been moving, maybe there might be something there that somebody might have noticed that it was out of place. The car was processed, at least as far as the public know, nothing unusual there. Maybe, but we just don't know about that. Okay, let's move on to this. And this was something that I think was in a news story that, so I need to ask you about it. Is that she had taken a loan out for $5,000. I don't have it in my notes when that was, but do we know anything about that? Why did she need that for the move? What was this for? What is maybe her husband? Did her husband know that she took this loan out? What do we know about this $5,000 loan?
Um, I went through her finances with a fine-tooth comb. And that was not the first loan she had taken out. She had taken out other loans. Her husband didn't know about them, but it didn't seem like that was uncommon. She handled all of the finances. She paid all of the bills. And so when I spoke to the husband about this, he felt like it wasn't unusual for her to have, taken out a loan and not told him about it. He didn't think that it was that strange. She had taken out a few loans. And from what we can tell, the money was used to live on. It was, just for basic living expenses. She had taken a few trips, visiting friends, shopped, bought things for the house, that kind of thing.
Okay. Would you say that if she had taken another loan, maybe this most recent loan, maybe she disappeared before she could totally pay it off? But these other loans, would you say that, as far as you could tell, and we're not saying you're a forensic accountant or anything, but maybe you are. I don't. Maybe that's one of your talents there, Elaine. I don't know. But could you tell if she fully paid all of these other loans off? Any problems with the bank? Any problems with her credit? Anything like that?
No, her credit was in really good shape, and she had paid off all of the loans before.
Okay.
So, yeah,
All
so
right.
it didn't appear that there was any kind of financial trouble, financial struggles, anything like that.
Okay. This the most recent one though. Was she in the process of paying that off when she disappeared? Was it
Yes.
okay? All right. Um, your opinion, and I just have to ask this: the way you look at it, of course, we're both adults here. Uh, when I hear about somebody taking out a $5,000 loan, even though they have a job and everything, would you say, in your opinion, could Holly have been living beyond her means, and that's why she needed the loan, or was it just something else?
It's possible that she was living a little beyond her means. It's not uncommon in Taos. The pay ratio to the cost of living ratio is, pretty drastic difference there in Taos.
Okay.
And so, yeah, she may have been living beyond her means a little bit.
Okay.
Needed the extra money for, like I said, to take trips, that kind of thing.
Okay. And we also have to remember she's in this situation where her husband's living in a totally different city. So, they have the rent down there. Maybe they have a mortgage on the house there. That can get expensive, especially if
Very
they're
much.
sharing bank accounts and everything.
Right.
Okay. So that's probably something that anybody in that kind of situation the money situation, of course, might get stressed a little bit. And maybe that's the way we need to look at it. And we also have to think about it this way. She took out these loans. The bank kept giving her loans, so they must have been pretty sure that she was going to be able to pay them back, right?
Yes,
Okay.
I would agree.
Okay. Let's move on to this. I'm not sure if this is something that you discovered. You can certainly state if it was, or something else that somebody else discovered, and then you found out about it later. Did somebody possibly see a car in her driveway that evening or that night, which would be May 5th of 2016, not Thursday? What can you say about that?
When I canvassed the area and spoke with the neighbors, one of the neighbors across the street mentioned that there was a car, not necessarily in her driveway, but parked off of the street in front of her house. And now the car was there. It would have been on Wednesday night. So it was not there when she disappeared. But the neighbors remember seeing a vehicle there. It would have been Wednesday night, and they saw it there. I think they walked out to the mailbox to get their mail or something like that, and saw it there. The next morning when they got up to go to work, they saw the car there. They don't know if the car was there all night, but it was certainly there Wednesday night and Thursday morning, and then was not seen after that.
All right, so Wednesday night into Thursday morning, not Thursday night into Friday morning.
Mm-mm.
Okay.
Mm-mm.
Any description of this car? I think you might have even told me that there was a particular license plate that was on it. Do we know anything about that?
The neighbor seems to think that the car was a black Toyota Solara. It was in good shape, didn't have any distinct markings or stickers on it. He believes that it had a green and white license plate, and we believe that it probably was a Colorado license plate.
Huh.
So far, no one has come forward saying that, they're a cousin or a friend or someone visiting from out of town. Nobody has come forward to say that, that's their car and that they were there that night.
All right.
Yeah.
So once again, we just have to clarify this would have been Wednesday night into Thursday morning, not Thursday night into Friday morning, which is the acceptance disappearance time. Okay. Did her husband, I guess maybe would know this, but I have to ask, was Jeff asked about this car? Did any person he knew maybe come to mind who might own a car like that? Any ideas?
He was the first person that I asked, and no, he didn't recall anybody that he or Holly knew with a car like that. Holly has a lot of family in Colorado, and so we thought maybe it was a family member, but we asked everyone that we could find, and nobody seems to know who that car belongs to.
All right, so we have this car that has this Colorado license plate, and having just checked on this just a moment ago, it's only an hour from Taos, at least to the border of Colorado, but still, no. You said she had some family there. Do you know what kind of family this is, or cousins? Do we even know that?
She has a couple of brothers that are in Colorado, and I believe she's got lots of cousins and maybe aunts and uncles.
Okay.
Out there in the Colorado area. Yeah.
Okay. All right. You'd said that she had used that loan, at least one of those loans, to do some trips. Were any of those trips to Colorado?
No. Not that no.
Not you can remember. Okay.
No.
Very good. All right. So we don't know what to make of this car, but we do have to remember this was like 24 hours before she went missing, but maybe it's something, especially considering whoever was driving this car, if we're to believe that it was there, has never come forward, which always, of course, makes investigators like you suspicious, makes reporters like me suspicious. Okay. Let's move on to this. Online searches. Did the police kind of look at her computer, being that her phone was still there, like for any searches or anything like that? And have you had the opportunity to look at those items yourself?
Yes, the New Mexico State Police have her computer and her phone right now. I have been able to look at just about everything that was on her computer and on her phone. And I've been and I've had some forensics training on the different programs that are used to look at this information. And so I've been looking at this for a long time, but I am still in the process of looking at all of Holly's Google searches on her laptop and her phone.
Okay.
Right now. Yeah.
All right.
So
I'm
far,
not going to get. I'm not going to get into every search because I realize if somebody were to look at my Google searches, who knows what people might think of me? They might, being the work that I do, they might think I'm a serial killer or something. But just sometimes we're always doing searches, just things pop in our head. So I'm just going to ask you
Right.
some very specific questions. I'm not going to ask you to name everything she searched for. Did she do any searches for suicide?
No.
No. Any searches regarding the bridge, like when people are usually there, or anything like that? Any searches for the bridge there that where her car was found?
No, none.
Okay. Maybe on a side note, really quickly, do we even know the last time she'd even been out to the bridge, maybe with friends or maybe just for a walk? Was this a place that she was known to go? She had a dog, take her dog and walk out there. Do we know anything about that?
It doesn't sound like it was a place that she went to often. She was not a real outdoorsy type person. She did walk her dog every day at a park, but she wasn't necessarily a hiker or that kind of thing like you would expect to find for somebody who goes out to the bridge or that area around there a lot. So to answer your question, I don't know when she had been to the bridge before. I do know that she had been to the bridge. Different family members had mentioned that they were out there with her at different times that they were visiting, but I don't know when the last time was that she was there.
Okay, very good. All all right, we're now going to move on to this. I know this is a touchy subject, so we're going to tread lightly. Once again, just because you've had a chance to look at her computer, was she communicating? We realized that she was married. Was she communicating with other people on the internet? Conversations, things like that.
Yeah, she, like a lot of people, she played a lot of games online. She played games on her phone, and I know that she met people that way.
Mm-hmm.
She had a lot of friends through her work. There was always a lot of networking going on with her work that would lead her to, making friends in other states. And so she was talking to a lot of people, both men and women, all over the place, which definitely has made my work a little more difficult.
I
A lot of
bet.
places to look.
Right.
Mhm.
Any proof that any of those people ever came to see her? Once again, proof. Any proof that any of those people ever came to see her in Taos, New Mexico? Once again, after, of course, she was living there by herself in that house for a year. Any proof any of these people who might, let's just maybe people she met online first, let's just put it that way, that came to visit her in Taos?
Definitely through the years, she had made friends through her work, people who had come out to visit. Um, and there are a few people that she did meet online that she met in person. My focus has been specifically looking at people that she may have met with close to the time that she disappeared. And the people that she was communicating the most with had not been to see her in the time close to her disappearance.
Okay. And
Yeah.
was these trips that you talked about earlier, some of those trips, possibly, once again, I'm not saying you track down every person she ever talked to and every place that she ever went. Any of these trips you think could have been involved with knowing some of these people and going to see them wherever they lived?
Possibly, could be. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Let's move on. Um, let's talk about, because we have to do this, as because we talk about on Unfound, the most common reason that people in relationships disappear is because of relationships. It's not because of money or anything like that. Usually when married women go missing, it's because the husband did it. I'm not saying I believe that. And of course, we know that he was living 2.5 hours away, but we got to talk about it. Husband, his alibi. Did he take a lie detector test? Did he ever offer up his own theory as to what could have happened? What do we know about the kind of the investigation that went into her husband, Jeff? And in fact, you just stated that you got to talk to him yourself. What can you say about Holly's husband?
I've worked closely with him throughout the entire investigation. I speak with him often. Um, he's been very forthcoming with anything that I've asked for. He's provided, just about everything that I needed him to provide. He did take a lie detector test early on and passed it. And the polygraph tests aren't foolproof. They're
No.
not admissible in court, but
Nope.
it really does help from an investigative standpoint. It helps you know what direction to go in. And so with him passing the polygraph, I felt like I could look in different directions. But, until we know exactly what happened to Holly, until we find a body, everyone's a suspect.
Right. Okay.
No one's
When I'm sure, once again, we can't ignore the fact that her car was found at a spot where people jump off a bridge. Did he ever say anything to you that, that say, you know what? I think, I could understand if she was, she's told me that she was feeling suicidal. Anything like that ever come out of his mouth?
never.
Never. Okay.
Hmm.
If you can say, and you do not have to say if you don't want to, but I have to ask. Has he ever given his own theory as to what happened to Holly?
I think that it's changed through the years. That's been true of a lot of people, people who at the beginning were so sure that, she jumped or whatever. As the time goes by, the years go by, it changes a little bit. And I don't want to speak for Jeff, but
No.
from what he's told me, it doesn't sound like he has ever felt like she was ever at that bridge. He doesn't feel like the Gorge Bridge plays any part in any of this except for the fact that her car was left there. He doesn't believe that she's suicidal. And honestly, he's mentioned to me that he really doesn't think that she's alive anymore.
Okay. Well, yeah, of course, you working on disappearances, me working on disappearances, we both know when a disappearance gets to be, as this one is, over 6 years old, yes, the odds of a person still being alive are very, very low, no matter what the circumstances were, unless the person planned to walk off and start a new life. But even if it was an accident or a suicide or foul player, yes, of course, the odds of somebody being alive 6 years later, of course, very, very low. Okay. But I do have to ask, regarding the searches and maybe putting up flyers. I know that Ray, her father, put up, I think something like 300 some flyers in Taos and elsewhere. What would you say about her husband's participation in trying to find out what happened to Holly's searches and anything else?
I would say that, I wasn't part of the police's investigation, and I didn't have my own investigation when these searches were going on.
Right.
So from what I've been told, though, I don't know that Jeff was a real big part of the searches or hanging up flyers or that kind of thing. That's what I've been told. I wasn't there.
Okay, thank you. All right, since you were there, we'll just go leave it with that. All right, and listeners, as listeners know, maybe that's not so uncommon. A lot of families usually leave it up to the authorities and experts to do this thing. Some people are so shell shocked, by it that they're not sure what to do. So there can be a lot of explanations there. If that is true, we're not saying it is, but if it is true. Now, I did see something which certainly caught my eye, and it's in an actual article regarding Holly's disappearance, and it actually comes from the police, and it is a quote. The police are confident she didn't jump, and by the time
the listeners and viewers are hearing us and seeing us, I will have posted this article. I got to ask you about that, Elaine. It's certainly my experience for the police to come out and say something. Allow me to say provocative, especially considering her car was at the bridge. Anything that you can say about that? Did you know about that article? Did you read that article when it came out? Being that you were already working on Holly's disappearance at the time, how does that strike you?
There have been different agencies that have worked on this case. The state police, for the majority of it, it's actually their case. But the sheriff's office has worked on it. The Albuquerque police, the Taos police has worked on it. And then different agencies that I've been involved in. And like I said before, through the years, I think the theories have changed. And I don't know, I'm not sure which agency in that article said that they didn't think she jumped, but I do know people in the police department who are sure that she jumped. And so I think that opinion, it varies. And I think that it also changes as more time goes by.
Right. Okay. Because as you know, once again, doing the work that you've been doing, the work that I've been doing, you usually know that the police, at least publicly, are usually very vague, very nebulous. They don't want to say confident about anything, especially in disappearances where most of the time you don't have any incident, anything happened of a violent nature, anything. So when I see the word confident, that's always going to catch my eye when it comes from the police. Early in this conversation, of course, we talked about how this bridge is known as being a place where people go to jump. Of course, the tough part is it seems that when these people do choose to jump, nobody sees them, and the only reason people know that they jumped is they're found below, or maybe like Holly, the car is found in the parking lot, then they go looking and the remains are found. But we stated that there was another woman who is also missing besides Holly, and her name is Melissa Crabtree. Did she disappear before or after Holly? We're not expecting you, of course, to be at a disappearance. Maybe you have looked into it. If you did, I'm sure the listeners would love to hear what you have to say about it. But about Melissa Crabtree, what do we know about her disappearance? Any similarities to Holly's?
Melissa went missing after Holly did. And I did look into her disappearance a little bit, mostly because her car was left at the bridge. Her car was found at the bridge. Bridge. It was, Holly's car was found on the west side of the bridge, close to the restrooms and the camp areas, that kind of thing. Melissa's was found on the other end of the bridge as you're coming in from town on the east side of the bridge. To my knowledge, those are the only two disappearances where cars were left on the bridge. So of course I looked into it and thought, is there some kind of connection here? Yeah. Do they know each other? Looked into all of that, and they don't appear to know each other. And as it turned out, the cases are really, really different. There's just, I think, probably the only similarity is that the cars were found there. Some of Melissa's friends are certain, though, that they spoke with Melissa after the car was found at the bridge. And I believe that there were even sightings of her in town after her car was found, which, leads me to think that it really may not have anything to do with the bridge at all. In Melissa's case, Melissa had told several people, friends and family, that she was very suicidal. She was dealing with some health issues, and she was having a tough time around the time that she disappeared. And so, very different from Holly.
Okay. Right. Yeah. And that's, once again, you know more about it than I do, but just in my general looking it over, certainly Holly and Melissa seem like two totally different types of people, did two totally different places in their lives. Melissa, I think, had a history of, like you said, mental issues and things. Holly did not. So yeah, and we can't even show that, you can't even show that the two even knew each other or something like that to even think that, could there be some sort of serial killer or something. So, okay. But I think what it proves, though, is that this, maybe this does happen. I'm not sure what to make of these sightings. I usually dismiss them, but maybe they're true. Let's move on to this. Let's just go through these choices. I usually don't do this with family members, but I don't mind doing this with an investigator. Would you say that there are some good reasons to believe that Holly, where would you put this on, in your hierarchy of possibilities? Would you say there are a lot of decent reasons to believe that suicide is the best choice here? And I'm going to, of course, you see the outline. I'm going to give you some other choices. I'm going to give you an opportunity to talk about those too. But just suicide. Good enough reasons to believe that that should be the number one choice or not?
Definitely not the number one choice.
Huh.
I think that Holly was, she was very organized. And I think that if Holly had chosen to kill herself, I think she probably would have left a note. And I also think that there are other ways that she would have killed herself than to jump off of a bridge.
Okay.
So suicide, definitely not number one.
Not number one in your book. Okay. What about murder? Foul play. Let's just call it foul play to keep it, somewhat PG. Foul play.
I would say foul play is definitely high on my list. Maybe the most high. I think it could be foul play. Up there with foul play could be accident. I think that an accident could have happened and somebody was there with her when it happened and panicked and covered it up. And so my two best theories right now are probably foul play or accident. Definitely
Okay.
not suicide. And yeah, that's where I stand right now. It could change. So
Right.
ask me again later.
Right. And as listeners know, I've had theories on disappearances that have been proven wrong. So, yes. Sometimes we get things wrong and we assess things differently. We overlook facts that we should have paid more attention to, and facts that we really think are important don't end up being anything. As far as a walk off, and reason I have to also ask you about this, it does seem like she had a lot going on. Moving, changing jobs. Of course, the selling a house, it sounds like she had sold it, but I don't know why the people who were going to buy it, backed out. I don't know what that has anything to do with anything. But, she's moving. She hadn't been living with her husband, for a year. Maybe there was angst about that. Could this just be that, man, it just got too much for her? And, we know walk-offs are very, very rare. But is that even a consideration in your book at all?
It was a lot more early on because I felt like I had to look at everything.
Mm-hmm.
In this day and age, there are cameras everywhere. I do a lot of work with facial recognition.
Mm-hmm.
And
Right.
I'm going to say that because her bank account has never been used, there have been no sightings. There have been a lot of sightings, I should say, where people think that they see her and then, we check it out and it ended up not being her. But as far as, cameras at airports and ATM machines and those types of things,
Yeah.
it seems like something would have come up if she were still alive somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And also in this day and age too, if you wanted to disappear, you wanted to move away with, a lover or something dramatic like that.
Yeah.
Why would you give up everything and everyone that you love when you could just do it? Just get a divorce if you want to get a divorce, and, tell your family and friends that, hey, I fall in love with someone else and I'm moving to a different place. In my experience, usually when people run away like that, it's usually because they're terrified of someone, something, and they are really hiding out. And I've not found anything in Holly's life that points to that at all.
Okay. What is the once again? You don't live right in Taos. You live somewhere else. But what would you say the local talking? Of course, you've been there many times. Maybe talking to locals and maybe friends. Of course, you've been talking to friends of Holly. Overall, what would you say the consensus opinion is?
I think that I've seen it change over the years. I think, at the beginning, people were wondering if it was suicide, and people were sort of second guessing their relationships with her and thinking, wow, maybe there's something I missed. Maybe she was depressed and I didn't know it, or something like that. But
Mhm.
I would say that for the most part, people just are really kind of steering away from suicide. They are just saying, after so much time has passed, she probably would have been found by now. And I think that early on, people did wonder if maybe she did disappear on her own. But again, so much time has passed without anything concrete. And so then the only thing that we're left with is probably foul play or accident.
Right.
And, people talk about it a lot.
Yeah.
I have a tip line, and I still get phone calls all this time later. People call into the tip line. People message me, contact me on our Facebook page with theories, with ideas. They remember somebody that they dated, at a certain time who, was odd to them or something. And, oh, can you check him out? Maybe he's got a tie to Holly, that kind of thing. So people still think about Holly. They still wonder what happened. And I think it's going to be one of the great mysteries in this area until we can figure out what happened.
Right. And in fact, I think for that year of 2016, her disappearance was the number one most popular news story in Taos that year. I think I saw something like sometimes the newspaper media sites do these. What was the biggest story of the year? What got the most clicks, or however they do it these days? And her disappearance was number one for 2016. So it certainly caught, a lot of people's attention. You might have had wildfires there, or maybe there was some kind of shooting or whatever. And still, her disappearance was the number one, most popular story, at least in
Yeah, no, I'm
2016.
not surprised at all. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Let's move on to something else. Being that you are a private investigator and you are licensed in the state of New Mexico, correct?
Yes.
Yes. Are every state's a little different. Very stringent laws regarding private investigators. Do you have to go through a lot to get your license, or how does that all happen? Because I'd like to talk about private investigating for a second, but how do you get your private investigator's license in New Mexico?
Well, New Mexico is one of the toughest states to get a private investigation license. And I think there are some states out there where you can even practice without a license.
That's true, yeah.
Yeah, New Mexico is definitely not one of them. At the time that I became a private investigator, trying to remember, it's been a little while. A lot was required. The biggest part is years of experience. They require something like, I'm going to say 6,000 hours. Some states are 8,000 hours. I'm not sure what New Mexico is now, but at the time you needed, I'm going to say about 6,000 hours of experience before you could even apply for your license, which means that you have to, be working for a private investigator or working for a law firm or that kind of thing to get your license. And then, of course, they do really strict background checks. I have to have a federal background check done every 2 years. And, there's some other things that you have to do. You got to do some testing. And a few other things. It's that the years of experience that really takes some time.
Okay. Because you had asked me a question before we got started here, you had asked me when was the last time I had a private investigator on the program. And it's been a while. Being that we've done, I think the last time, and she wasn't even on as a private in the capacity as a private investigator, but she has her license, and that's my very good friend Caroline Lowe, who was on to talk about the Jody Husentrue disappearance from Iowa way back in 1995. But she was on because she was a reporter who eventually got interested in it. She was not into the Jody's disappearance as a private investigator. In fact, she lives in California. But other than that, it's been, maybe since the first year Unfound started, coincidentally in 2016 into 2017, that I had a private investigator. Because I'm going to be honest with you, and the reason you're on is because I find you to be very reputable. I think you've done a fantastic job. If I didn't think that, you, of course, would not have been interviewed. Okay, that just would have ended right there. But my experience with private investigators has been horrible. I think that I've gotten this very jaded opinion regarding private investigators because I hear about, a lot of people, them ripping a lot of family members off and doing a lot of things. And in fact, I'll be on, and the listeners know this, you don't know this, but I'm going to tell you this right now. I got to know a private investigator fairly well that worked on a disappearance that I covered. I then recommended this private investigator who I trusted to one of my guests, and that private investigator in turn propositioned for sex my guest. That happened. And so, of course, when it comes to private investigators these days, I try to maybe stay away from them unless they really, really come recommended or, like you, doing a fine job, above board, honest job. Would you say that my experience is, the exception, or in your circles, would you say that you do run into a lot of private investigators who are a little shadier than probably they should be, given that they are doing investigating for crimes? What would you say about your own profession?
Wow. I hope that what you've been through is, not common. You hear a lot of stories about private investigators. And I know that Holly's dad was even warned against hiring a private investigator early on. Somebody told him, don't do it. They're just after your money. They just want to be a cop, that kind of thing. And so you do hear that a lot. I do hear about every so often, I hear about people getting, scammed. They just want to take your money, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. I think it's sad. It's unfortunate. But I do hear, I know a lot of private investigators because that's the field that I'm in. And they're wonderful people. They work hard. They care about their clients. And, a lot of us, we don't do this for the money. In fact, the majority of the cases that I take pro bono, and I finance some of the cases myself. And so I don't know if I'm the exception to the rule or not, but I will tell you that Holly's case has become very personal to me. Mm-hmm. I have adopted her dad, into my family. He's become family to me. And I think that, it's a little different being a female PI also. That's interesting. I'm not a cop. I don't have, police background. That's not been my, my life, my experience. So the kind of work that I do, I feel like I'm really able to connect with people on a different level. People feel comfortable talking to me. And as a PI, that's what you want. That's your job. Your job is to connect with people and to get information and put the puzzle pieces together. And that's what I do. And I hope I'm good at it. I think my reputation speaks for itself. And I don't know what else to say on that.
Okay, very good. I wanted to give you an opportunity because, once again, listeners and viewers of this YouTube channel and on Spotify and everywhere else know that I've gone off on a few rants over the past few years on private investigators in general. And I will tell you that there are a couple private investigators out there who don't care for me. But I can also say that, true crime podcasting kind of has a reputation too. And I think maybe sometimes when, people hear that, oh, sensationalism, using crimes for entertainment and things like that. So anytime somebody asks me, well, is that true, Ed? Will you do that? I always feel I'm glad they're asking me because, well, I know that goes on, but that's not really what I do. Okay, I'm here to solve problems. I'm here to educate people. I've been to college campuses talking to criminal justice majors. So I'm always happy when people give me the opportunity to maybe defend what I do and, acknowledge, yeah, there are some shady people out there, but I would like to think I'm not doing that. That's why I thought I would give you the opportunity to do that too. So I appreciate your words. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you have a Facebook page? Maybe we should do this. How would people, being that this is your job, how would people get in touch with you regarding Holly's disappearance? Or maybe there is even a family out there that needs your help. How would people reach you, if they're interested in employing you or have information regarding Holly's disappearance? How would they reach you?
Well, we have a Facebook page that was started by Holly's friends in 2016 when she first disappeared. And through the years, I've ended up manning that page. And so it's Find Holly White on Facebook. We're on Instagram and Twitter also. Same thing, find Holly White. Okay. I did want to mention also that there is a $20,000 reward for anyone who can lead us to her remains, her information, leading to what happened to her. Yeah. We also have a tip line that is still active, and we've had it up since Holly disappeared. And that phone number is 575-613-3415. And I can be reached at that number, or I can be reached on the Find Holly White Facebook page.
Very good. Okay. Very good. Thank you. Elaine, any final words before we complete this interview?
I just want to say thank you, Ed, for bringing attention to Holly's case. And all of the work that you do. It's important to get the word out and to get it out there nationally, and to just let people know that we haven't forgotten Holly. We haven't given up on looking for her. I work on this case almost every day. I talk to her dad every few days. And just because you don't see something on Facebook or, we can't always share all of the information that we get, it doesn't mean that we've stopped looking for her. It doesn't mean that we've given up. So we're still looking for her, and I'll look for her as long as I can.
Elaine, thank you for being on this episode of Unfound.
Thank you, Ed. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. And that was my June 25th, 2022 interview with Elaine Graves, private investigator for Holly White's family. I thank her for appearing on both video and audio for this episode. And yes, nobody's more surprised than I am that I had a private investigator as a guest. Hey, I wake up every day looking for an honest person. When I find one, she or he is on the podcast. I produced a map analysis video for Holly's disappearance. I look at the location of the bridge, the parking lot, and the downstream area. while also providing some insights on each of them. You can find that video on the Unfound podcast channel on YouTube. I'm not saying I believe this theory, but if some of you are to believe Holly jumped off the bridge, then there's not much else that can be done but to keep searching downstream, foot by foot, yard by yard, along the banks of the Rio Grande. Likewise, if you're inclined to believe someone killed Holly and threw her off the bridge, there are no facts to dispute that. The same answer is true. Just got to keep searching downstream, but also try to figure out who that perpetrator is. And that is what you might call my canned answer for the disappearances mentioned at the beginning of this episode. Shane Fell, Jake Lachelet, Ben Archer, Crystal Bailey, and there may be a few others. Just got to keep searching. And in all of those, foul play could be a factor. The question, is foul play a viable choice for Holly's disappearance? As you heard Elaine say, that is in fact her first choice. But what are the factors that need to be considered for you, the audience? Allow me to now go through some pro foul play factors. I will then go through some con foul play factors. First, that car the neighbor saw. We don't know who the owner was. Yet remember, this was a full 36 hours before Holly went missing. But we also have to figure in how unreliable eyewitness accounts are. Next, the people Holly met online. In fact, traveling to other states to meet some of them. One of them certainly could have showed up at her door the night of May 5th. There are no facts to dispute that. Next, the dirty condition of Holly's car, as if it had been on a rough road before being put in that parking lot. As Elaine said, there was no reason, seemingly, for the car to look like that. If Holly drove it from her house to the bridge, there are no dirt roads on the way. Now here's something not mentioned specifically in the interview. Holly's dog. Would Holly really commit suicide and leave her dog in the house where it could run out of food and not be able to go to the bathroom? Very hard to understand. So what are some con foul play factors? First, stress. New job, new city, moving. Many of us have done that. Yes, most of us don't go missing, yet we know the anxiety all that can cause. Next, that job she would be getting. This is just a perception of mine, but in Taos, she had what was a fairly exclusive, special, unique job. In addition, that job put her right in the middle of the arts community, which is very prominent there. Whereas her job in Albuquerque was going to be working at a dentist's office. That is surely a drop in stature. No offense to all the dental people out there. Then there are those loans, despite Holly paying them back. Maybe I'm old-fashioned, but I don't go on trips and buy things I can't afford. Personal loans for working people are to cover unforeseen expenses. Roof leaks, big car repairs, stuff like that. Not trips and everyday items. Finally, the fact that for somebody to leave Holly's car at the bridge, this would then mean more than one person was involved in Holly's disappearance, because the person would have needed a ride back into Taos or wherever. The question is, would at least two people, presumably men, have shown up at Holly's to then abduct her and kill her? Whatever you believe, all of us will not allow this disappearance to go away. I'll leave the theorizing up to you.
And that's the program. Right now, while you are in your podcast platform, Spotify, YouTube, iTunes, wherever, Give Unfound a 5-star review, a thumbs up, whatever that platform allows. I thank you for listening. I'm Ed Densel, and you've just finished this episode of Unfound.